At first glance, Slugma seems almost too simple to linger on for very long. A small molten creature slowly moving its way through the world, leaving faint traces of heat behind it. But when you take the time to really look at Slugma, to consider where it comes from, how it survives, and what it represents within the Pokémon world, it quietly becomes one of the more unusual and surprisingly complex creatures introduced in the series. Slugma is not defined by speed, power, or spectacle. Instead, it exists as a study in environment, adaptation, and the strange balance between fragility and danger. Slugma was introduced in Generation 2, appearing for the first time in the Johto region. Unlike many fire-type Pokémon that are associated with flames, fur, or combustion, Slugma is literally made of molten lava. Its body resembles a living pool of magma, constantly glowing and slowly shifting as it moves. This immediately sets it apart from other fire types, because Slugma is not just using fire as a weapon or ability. Fire is its body, its structure, and its life force. According to Pokédex entries across multiple generations, Slugma's body temperature is incredibly high, often described as being comparable to magma deep within the earth. This creates an interesting paradox. Despite being extremely hot, Slugma itself is not particularly durable. Its body is soft and unstable, meaning it must move slowly to maintain its shape. If it cools down too much, it begins to harden and crack, putting its life at risk. This means Slugma is constantly in a delicate balance between heat and movement. This idea of constant motion as a survival mechanism is central to Slugma's existence. Many Pokédex entries mention that Slugma must keep moving to prevent its magma body from cooling and solidifying. Unlike Pokémon that can rest, sleep, or hide comfortably, Slugma's rest is dangerous. Stillness is not peace for Slugma, it is a threat. The creature must continue to crawl forward, even slowly, to remain alive. That detail alone makes Slugma feel strangely vulnerable. Despite being made of molten lava, something we normally associate with destruction, Slugma itself is fragile in its own way. If its internal heat drops, it suffers. If it moves too fast, it risks losing its shape. Its life is a careful, continuous process of balance. Slugma's habitat reflects this need for heat. It is typically found in volcanic areas, caves with geothermal activity, or places where underground heat keeps the environment warm. In Johto, Slugma appears near volcanic regions, reinforcing the idea that it is a Pokémon deeply tied to the planet itself. It doesn't live on the surface comfortably, it lives where the earth is alive and hot beneath the crust. The design of Slugma reinforces its nature perfectly. It has no visible limbs, no eyes that stand out sharply, and no rigid features. Everything about it looks soft, flowing, and unstable, like liquid barely holding together. Its color palette, primarily reds and oranges, mimics real molten rock, and its constantly dripping appearance suggests that parts of it are always melting and reforming. Slugma evolves into Mag Cargo at level 38, a relatively late evolution compared to many early Pokémon. This late evolution reflects the idea that Slugma is a slow-developing creature, one that takes time to stabilize and grow stronger. When it evolves, it gains a hardened shell, turning into something more durable, but also more extreme in temperature. That evolution represents a shift from fragile balance to dangerous stability. Before evolving, however, Slugma remains in this in-between state. It is powerful enough to survive extreme environments, but weak enough to be threatened by cooling or environmental changes. This makes it an interesting metaphor within the Pokémon world, a creature that thrives only under very specific conditions. In battle, Slugma is not particularly fast or strong. Its base stats are low compared to many other fire types, and it is often outclassed by faster, harder hitting Pokemon. However, its defensive typing as fire, rock after evolution gives it unique resistances and weaknesses that reflect its volcanic nature. Even before evolving, Slugma's fire typing gives it immunity to burn and resistance to fire attacks, fitting for a creature made of lava. Slugma's move pool also reflects its environment. It learns moves like Ember, Smog, and Flame Burst, attacks that feel less like sharp strikes and more like ambient heat and pressure. Smog, in particular, ties into volcanic gases, reinforcing Slugma's connection to underground activity. Later on, it can learn moves that emphasize heat buildup rather than explosive force. One of the most interesting aspects of Slugma is how extreme some of its Pokédex descriptions are when taken literally. Certain entries describe its body temperature as being hotter than the surface of the sun. While this is clearly exaggerated for dramatic effect, it creates an interesting contrast with how calmly Slugma is usually portrayed. It doesn't rampage. It doesn't destroy cities. It simply exists, slowly moving through its environment despite supposedly being unimaginably hot. This exaggeration highlights a recurring theme in Pokémon lore, where Pokédex entries often describe creatures in extreme terms that don't always align perfectly with gameplay or story depiction. In Slugma's case, this creates a strange disconnect between its quiet, slow behavior and the apocalyptic implications of its temperature. Rather than breaking immersion, this contrast adds a layer of surreal charm. Slugma's slow movement speed is also a defining trait. It is one of the slowest Pokémon in terms of base speed, which fits perfectly with its molten form. Lava does not rush, it flows. Slugma embodies that concept. It advances gradually, reshaping the ground beneath it, not through sudden force, but through persistence. This slowness also affects how trainers perceive Slugma. It is rarely chosen for fast-paced strategies or aggressive playstyles. Instead, it feels like a Pokémon meant to be observed rather than rushed. Using Slugma encourages patience, careful planning, and acceptance of a slower rhythm. In the anime, Slugma is often depicted as calm and unthreatening, despite its dangerous nature. It does not seek conflict. It simply reacts when approached carelessly. This reinforces the idea that Slugma is not malicious. It is natural. Its danger is a byproduct of what it is, not what it wants. There is also something quietly interesting about Slugma's duality. It is both a hazard and a living being. It can burn, melt, and damage its surroundings, yet it is also vulnerable to environmental changes. It cannot survive just anywhere. It needs warmth, consistency, and time. Slugma's presence in the Pokémon world adds texture to volcanic regions. Instead of volcanoes being empty or purely dangerous spaces, Slugma turns them into ecosystems. It suggests that life adapts even in extreme conditions, finding ways to exist where it shouldn't be possible. Over time, Slugma has remained a relatively obscure Pokémon. It is rarely featured prominently in marketing or storylines, and it doesn't have the immediate popularity of flashier designs. Yet, it continues to appear across generations, quietly holding its place in the Pokédex as a reminder that not every Pokémon is meant to be dramatic. Slugma represents a slower, quieter kind of existence. It does not chase glory or battle constantly. It survives. It moves forward at its own pace, shaped by the heat of the earth and the need to keep going. In a world filled with fast battles and powerful legendaries, Slugma exists as something more elemental, a living reminder of the planet itself, slowly flowing beneath everything else, steady and unassuming, yet always present. Gliding quietly just beneath the surface of the ocean, Mantine feels like a Pokémon that was never meant to rush. It doesn't charge forward, leap dramatically, or demand attention. Instead, it moves with patience and control, drifting through the water as if the currents themselves are carrying it along. Mantine is a water and flying type Pokemon introduced in Generation 2, and from its very first appearance, it established itself as something gentle, expansive, and calm, a creature designed more for endurance and balance than aggression. Mantine evolves from Mantike, a smaller and more playful pre-evolution that was introduced later in Generation 4. Originally, Mantine existed on its own without a baby form, which gave it the feeling of a fully realized species from the start. When Mantike was added, it reframed Mantine as the mature, experienced version of a creature that begins life small and dependent. The evolution method itself is unusual, requiring a specific companion in the party, reinforcing the idea that Mantine's growth is tied to coexistence rather than isolation. Mantine's design is inspired by manta rays, large sea creatures known for their wide fins and graceful movement. Its body is broad and flat, with enormous wing-like fins that stretch outward, allowing it to glide effortlessly through water. These fins also justify its flying typing, suggesting that Mantine doesn't simply swim, but soars underwater, using currents the way birds use air. Its tail curls upward slightly, and its face often appears calm, almost smiling, giving it a peaceful presence. Unlike many water-type Pokemon that emphasize strength or speed, Mantine emphasizes stability and resilience. Its Pokédex entries often describe it as a Pokemon that enjoys riding ocean currents, drifting calmly through the sea without urgency. Some entries mention that smaller fish Pokemon swim alongside it, finding shelter beneath its fins. This detail is important because it frames Mantine not as a predator, but as a protector, a large and steady presence in the ocean ecosystem. That sense of protection is reflected in Mantine's personality across different media. It is rarely shown attacking unless threatened. Instead, it is portrayed as peaceful and cooperative, content to exist within its environment rather than dominate it. This makes Mantine feel like part of the background of the Pokemon world, a creature that adds depth to the oceans without demanding focus. Mantine's water. Flying typing is relatively rare and creates an interesting combination of strengths and weaknesses. It gains immunity to ground-type moves due to its flying type, which is useful against common threats. However, it also gains a significant weakness to electric-type attacks, which are especially dangerous for water types. This creates a clear vulnerability that trainers must account for, reinforcing the idea that Mantine survives through awareness and positioning rather than brute force. Stat-wise, Mantine is known for its exceptional special defense. This makes it one of the most reliable special walls among water-type Pokemon. It can absorb special attacks with ease, shrugging off moves that would overwhelm less resilient Pokemon. Its HP and defense are also respectable, further enhancing its role as a tank. In contrast, its offensive stats are relatively modest, especially its attack, which encourages a defensive playstyle. This stat distribution fits Mantine's design perfectly. It is not meant to overwhelm opponents quickly, it is meant to endure. In battle, Mantine excels at staying on the field, supporting teammates, and slowly wearing down opponents through consistency rather than force. It embodies patience as a strategy. Mantine's move pool reinforces this identity. It learns water-type moves like Surf and Hydro Pump, but it also has access to moves like Wing Attack, Air Slash, and Bounce, reflecting its aerial nature. More importantly, it can learn supportive moves, such as Roost, which allows it to recover health and wide guard in later generations, which protects the entire team from certain attacks. These moves emphasize protection and longevity. One of Mantine's most defining abilities is Water Absorb, which allows it to heal when hit by water-type moves instead of taking damage. This ability turns one of the most common attack types in the game into a source of recovery, making Mantine especially effective in water-heavy environments. It can also have the ability Swift Swim, which doubles its speed in rain, allowing it to move more quickly when weather conditions align. In later generations, Mantine gained the ability Water Veil, which prevents it from being burned. This ability further reinforces its defensive nature, ensuring that its physical performance is not weakened by status conditions. Each of these abilities contributes to the idea that Mantine is built to survive, adapt, and remain steady, even under pressure. Mantine's presence in the anime often reinforces its calm demeanor. It is frequently shown gliding through the ocean in groups, carrying people or Pokémon on its back, and serving as a gentle guide rather than a threat. In some episodes, Mantine appears almost like a living vehicle, transporting characters across the sea with ease. This portrayal highlights its size and strength while maintaining its peaceful image. Mantine has also played a unique role in later games through side activities. In certain titles, Mantine surfing became a minigame, allowing players to ride across waves on Mantine's back. This further cemented its identity as a Pokémon associated with smooth movement and enjoyment rather than conflict. Instead of battling, Mantine becomes a means of exploration and relaxation. Ecologically, Mantine feels like a keystone species in the Pokémon world's oceans. The idea that smaller creatures swim beneath it suggests a symbiotic relationship where Mantine provides safety and guidance while benefiting from the presence of other life. This concept adds realism to the Pokémon ecosystem, making the world feel interconnected rather than isolated. Mantine's evolution from Mantike also introduces an interesting requirement. Mantike only evolves into Mantine if a specific species is present in the party. This requirement reinforces the idea that Mantine's growth depends on companionship. It does not evolve in isolation. It evolves through coexistence. This is a rare and meaningful detail in Pokémon evolution mechanics, tying biological development to social interaction. Despite its strengths, Mantine is not commonly chosen as a main team member by casual players. Its lack of offensive pressure makes it less exciting for fast-paced playthroughs. However, players who appreciate defensive strategies often recognize its value. Mantine rewards patience and planning, offering stability in battles that might otherwise spiral out of control. Mantine's rarity also contributes to its quiet reputation. It is not found everywhere, and encountering one often feels like discovering something special rather than routine. This rarity fits its calm presence. Mantine does not flood the seas. It drifts through them selectively, appearing when conditions is true. Over the years, Mantine has remained consistent in design and identity. It has not undergone drastic redesigns or gimmicks. It continues to represent calm strength, endurance, and harmony with the ocean. While other Pokémon evolve into flashier or more aggressive forms, Mantine remains true to its original concept. There is something almost meditative about Mantine. Its wide fins, slow movements, and serene expression give it a presence that feels soothing rather than threatening. In a franchise filled with battles, rivalries, and high-stakes conflicts, Mantine exists as a reminder that not all strength needs to be loud. In the broader Pokémon world, Mantine contributes to a sense of scale. Its size and grace make the oceans feel vast and alive. Seeing a Mantine glide past suggests depth beneath the surface, a living world that continues whether or not the player is watching. Mantine's name itself reflects its inspiration. It combines manta with marine, reinforcing its identity as a creature of the sea. The name is soft and flowing, much like the Pokémon itself, lacking harsh consonants or aggressive tones. Ultimately, Mantine represents balance. It balances water and air, offense and defense, solitude and companionship. It is a Pokémon that thrives not through dominance, but through consistency and calm. It does not rush toward victory. It waits, endures, and moves forward with the current, steady and unbothered, a quiet presence drifting through the vastness of the Pokémon world. There are some Pokémon that feel large because of their power, and others that feel large because of their presence alone. Wailord belongs firmly in the second category. It doesn't need to move quickly, attack aggressively, or dominate its surroundings to feel important. Its sheer size, combined with its calm and almost indifferent behavior, makes it one of the most quietly overwhelming creatures in the Pokémon world. When Wailord appears, it changes the scale of everything around it. Wailord was introduced in Generation 3 as the evolution of Wailmer, and from the moment it entered the series, it stood out for one reason above all else: its size. According to official Pokédex data, Wailord is one of the largest Pokémon ever recorded by length, measuring over 47 feet long. Despite this massive size, its weight is surprisingly low for a creature of its dimensions, a detail that has fascinated players for years. This unusual combination of size and lightness is explained through Wailord's biology. Its body is filled with air, allowing it to float easily on the surface of the ocean. Rather than being dense and heavy like a traditional whale, Wailord is buoyant, almost balloon-like, drifting effortlessly through water. This makes it less of a deep-sea leviathan and more of a massive living float, gently carried by waves and currents. Wailord's design reflects this concept perfectly. Its body is long and cylindrical, with smooth curves rather than sharp edges. Its fins are relatively small compared to its size, reinforcing the idea that it doesn't rely on strong propulsion. Instead, Wailord moves by adjusting its buoyancy and allowing water to guide it. Its expression is simple and calm, often appearing neutral or slightly content, giving it an almost sleepy demeanor. This calmness is reinforced in Pokédex entries, which describe Wailord as a Pokémon that spends much of its time floating on the surface of the sea. It doesn't hunt aggressively, it doesn't chase prey. Instead, it opens its mouth and lets water flow in, filtering nutrients as it drifts. This feeding method mirrors real-world baleen whales and reinforces Wailord's role as a passive giant rather than a predator. Despite its enormous size, Wailord is not portrayed as dangerous by default. It does not terrorize ships or attack coastal towns. In fact, its presence often feels peaceful. Seeing Wailord floating in the ocean gives the impression of an ancient, slow-moving creature that has existed long before human activity and will likely continue long after. Wailord's water typing suits its environment well, but its stat distribution is where things become especially interesting. It has one of the highest HP stats of any Pokémon, reflecting its massive body and endurance. This enormous health pool allows it to absorb damage over long battles, making it difficult to take down quickly. However, its defense and special defense are relatively low for such a large creature, reinforcing the idea that it survives through sheer bulk rather than toughness. This creates a unique battle identity. Wailord can endure a great deal of punishment, but it cannot shrug off powerful hits the way more armored Pokémon can. This means that while it stays on the field for a long time, it is still vulnerable if opponents target it strategically. This balance mirrors its real-world inspiration: massive creatures that are resilient through size, not armor. Offensively, Wailord's stats are moderate. It can deal damage, but it is not known for overwhelming force. Its move pool includes powerful water-type attacks like Water Spout, which becomes stronger the more HP Wailord has remaining. This move perfectly complements its massive health pool, rewarding players who keep Wailord healthy and reinforcing the importance of endurance. Water Spout is one of Wailord's most iconic moves, and it highlights the connection between its biology and battle mechanics. As Wailord remains healthy, the move represents the full force of the ocean being unleashed. As its health decreases, the move weakens, reflecting how even a massive creature becomes less effective when worn down. Wailord's abilities further emphasize its aquatic nature. Water Veil prevents burns, ensuring that its physical performance isn't hindered by heat-based attacks. Oblivious prevents infatuation and intimidation effects in later generations, suggesting that Wailord is mentally unaffected by distractions or fear. These abilities reinforce the idea of a creature that remains steady and unconcerned with smaller threats. In the anime, Wailord is often depicted as awe-inspiring, simply due to its size. Characters react with shock or amazement when it appears, and scenes involving Wailord often emphasize how small humans and other Pokémon are by comparison. Yet even in these moments, Wailord is rarely aggressive. It simply exists, moving slowly and calmly through its environment. One of the most memorable uses of Wailord in the games comes from its role in accessing certain hidden locations. Due to its massive size, Wailord is sometimes required to trigger environmental changes or unlock secrets. This reinforces the idea that its presence alone has an impact on the world, not because it actively does something, but because it is too large to ignore. Ecologically, Wailord feels like a foundational species within the Pokémon world's oceans. Its feeding habits suggest it plays a role in maintaining balance by filtering nutrients and supporting marine ecosystems. The idea that smaller creatures live around and beneath it creates a sense of scale and interconnectedness in ocean environments. Wailord's evolution from Wailmer also reflects growth in scale rather than complexity. Wailmer is round, playful, and bouncy, often depicted as cheerful and energetic. When it evolves, it doesn't become more aggressive or more intelligent. It simply becomes larger, slower, and more deliberate. This evolution feels natural, as though Wailord is simply Wailmer grown to its full size. The contrast between Wailord's immense length and its light weight has become a long-running topic among fans. While the numbers may seem unrealistic, they serve an important purpose in design. By making Wailord lighter than expected, the creators preserve its ability to float and glide gracefully, rather than sink or crash through the environment. This design choice prioritizes visual and thematic consistency over realism. Wailord's presence also affects how players perceive the ocean itself. When such a massive creature exists, the sea feels deeper, wider, and more mysterious. It suggests that there are things beneath the surface far larger and older than the player. This sense of scale enhances immersion, making the world feel alive beyond immediate interaction. Despite its size, Wailord is not commonly used in competitive play. Its defensive weaknesses and reliance on HP make it vulnerable to certain strategies. However, players who enjoy unconventional builds often find satisfaction in using Wailord as a durable, disruptive presence. Its sheer bulk can surprise opponents who underestimate it. Over time, Wailord has remained largely unchanged in design and role. It hasn't received alternate forms or dramatic redesigns. This consistency reinforces its identity as a stable, enduring creature. It doesn't need updates or reinvention. Its concept works as it is. There is something quietly humbling about Waylord. It reminds players that strength doesn't always come from speed or aggression. Sometimes it comes from persistence, from occupying space, from simply continuing forward despite the currents. Waylord also highlights a recurring theme in Pokémon design: contrast. It is massive yet gentle, powerful yet passive, overwhelming yet calm. These opposing traits create a creature that feels believable within its world, even if its statistics stretch realism. Some Pokémon feel powerful the moment you see them, not because they are fast or flashy, but because they radiate permanence. Tyranitar is one of those Pokémon. It doesn't look like something that merely lives in the world. It looks like something the world has learned to live around. From its towering posture to its heavy, deliberate movements, Tyranitar gives the impression of a creature that reshapes its surroundings simply by existing. Tyranitar was introduced in Generation 2 as the final evolution of Larvitar, a small, rock-eating Pokémon that begins life hidden away underground. That origin matters, because Tyranitar is not a Pokémon that appears suddenly. It is the result of time, pressure, and isolation. According to Pokédex entries, Larvitar is born deep beneath the earth, feeding on soil and minerals for years before ever emerging. By the time it evolves into Tyranitar, it has already spent most of its life unseen, growing stronger in darkness. This slow, hidden development gives Tyranitar a unique sense of age. Even when encountered in-game, it feels ancient, like something that has existed long before trainers arrived. Its design reinforces this impression. Tyranitar stands upright like a living fortress, covered in thick, armor-like plates. Its body is angular and rigid, with sharp spikes protruding from its back, making it look more like a walking mountain than a traditional creature. Tyranitar's typing as rock and dark is significant. The rock typing ties it directly to the earth, stone, and geological time. The dark typing, introduced in Generation 2, represents ruthlessness, instinct, and survival rather than literal darkness. Combined, these types suggest a Pokémon that survives through raw force and unyielding will, not through elegance or precision. In the Pokédex, Tyranitar is often described in extreme terms. Some entries claim that it can topple mountains, alter landscapes, and cause massive earthquakes just by rampaging. Others describe it as being completely indifferent to damage, brushing off attacks as if they were meaningless. While these descriptions are exaggerated, they serve an important narrative purpose. Tyranitar is meant to feel unstoppable. What makes Tyranitar interesting is not just its power, but its isolation. Many Pokédex entries emphasize that it lives alone. Other Pokémon avoid it. Entire habitats shift around its presence. This solitude suggests that Tyranitar does not form communities or seek companionship. It exists independently, relying only on its own strength. This makes it feel less like an animal and more like a force of nature. Stat-wise, Tyranitar reflects this identity perfectly. It has extremely high attack and defense, allowing it to deal massive damage while also enduring physical hits. Its special defense is significantly boosted in sandstorms due to its rock typing, making it even harder to take down under the right conditions. Its speed is relatively low, reinforcing the idea that Tyranitar does not rush. It advances steadily, absorbing punishment and striking back with overwhelming force. One of Tyranitar's defining abilities is Sandstream, which automatically summons a sandstorm when it enters battle. This is not just a gameplay mechanic, it is a statement. Tyranitar does not adapt to the environment adapts to Tyranitar. The moment it arrives, the weather changes, reinforcing the idea that it reshapes the battlefield simply by being present. Sandstorms also benefit Tyranitar defensively, increasing its special defense and wearing down opponents over time. This creates a battle style focused on endurance and inevitability. Tyranitar doesn't need to knock out opponents quickly. It can wait. The storm will do part of the work for it. Tyranitar's move pool further emphasizes brute strength. It learns powerful rock and dark type attacks, along with earth-based moves that reinforce its connection to the ground. Many of its attacks feel heavy and destructive rather than precise. These are moves meant to crush, not finesse. Despite its immense power, Tyranitar also has notable weaknesses. Its rock. Dark typing gives it a severe weakness to fighting type attacks, which can deal massive damage. It also has weaknesses to water, grass, ground, fairy, and bug. These vulnerabilities prevent Tyranitar from being invincible, ensuring that even a creature this powerful has limits. This balance is important because it keeps Tyranitar grounded within the rules of the world. Tyranitar's evolutionary line tells a story of transformation through hardship. Larvitar begins life weak and hungry, feeding constantly to survive. Pupitar, the middle stage, is encased in a hard shell, immobile and defensive, almost cocoon-like. This stage represents protection and preparation. When Pupitar finally evolves, the shell breaks open, revealing Tyranitar, fully formed and ready to dominate its environment. This evolution process mirrors real-world metamorphosis while also feeling geological, like pressure building beneath the earth until something massive emerges. It's one of the most thematically coherent evolution lines in the series. In the anime, Tyranitar is often portrayed as intimidating and nearly unstoppable. Characters react with fear or awe when it appears, and battles involving Tyranitar tend to emphasize its durability. Attacks that would normally knock out other Pokémon barely slow it down. This portrayal reinforces its reputation as a juggernaut. There is also an interesting contrast between Tyranitar's design and its behavior. Despite looking aggressive, it is not always depicted as malicious. It does not attack without reason. Instead, it defends territory and reacts to threats. This frames Tyranitar as territorial rather than evil, another natural force responding to intrusion. Tyranitar's inspiration is often linked to kaiju, giant monsters from Japanese cinema that symbolize uncontrollable natural disasters. Like those creatures, Tyranitar represents humanity's fear of forces beyond control. It cannot be reasoned with easily. It cannot be contained indefinitely. It simply exists, powerful and indifferent. This kaiju influence explains why Tyranitar feels so different from many other Pokémon. It is not cute. It is not sleek. It is imposing. Its silhouette alone communicates danger, yet it is still part of the natural world, not an aberration. Over the years, Tyranitar has remained relevant across generations. It has received Mega Evolution, further amplifying its power and giving it a more feral appearance. Even without this form, it continues to be a staple in competitive play due to its stats, ability, and versatility. Few Pokémon introduced in Generation 2 have maintained such consistent relevance. Mega Tyranitar pushes its identity even further, increasing its already massive attack and defense. Its spikes grow larger, its posture becomes more aggressive, and it feels less like a living mountain and more like a walking catastrophe. This form represents what Tyranitar might become if it fully embraced destruction. Despite this, Tyranitar is not often associated with chaos for its own sake. It does not seek to destroy the world, it simply follows instinct. This distinction matters. Tyranitar is dangerous not because it is evil, but because it is powerful and unconcerned with smaller beings. In a broader sense, Tyranitar adds weight to the Pokémon world. Its existence suggests that some Pokémon are not meant to be companions in the traditional sense. They are challenges, obstacles, and reminders of the limits of control. Training one is not just an achievement, it is a responsibility. The rarity of Tyranitar also contributes to its mystique. Larvitar is not easily found, and raising it requires patience. This mirrors the Pokémon's thematic focus on time and endurance. You do not rush a Tyranitar into existence, you wait for it. There is something grounding about Tyranitar's presence. In a world filled with psychic powers, energy beams, and reality-warping creatures, Tyranitar remains physical. It hits hard. It stands firm. It survives through mass and resilience rather than mysticism. Tyranitar represents the idea that not all strength is flashy. Some strength is slow, heavy, and relentless. It builds over time, shaped by pressure and isolation, until it becomes something nearly unmovable. Ultimately, Tyranitar is a Pokémon defined by inevitability. It will arrive, it will endure, and when it moves, the world will notice, not because it seeks attention, but because nothing that massive can ever truly be ignored. Some Pokémon feel like they belong to a specific place, while others feel like they bring their own atmosphere with them wherever they go. Ludicolo belongs to the second group. Its presence changes the mood of a scene almost immediately, not through power or intimidation, but through rhythm, movement, and an almost contagious sense of energy. Ludicolo does not rush, threaten, or overwhelm. It dances, sways, and exists in a way that feels oddly joyful, even when viewed quietly and without spectacle. Ludicolo was introduced in Generation 3 as the final evolution of Lotad, evolving from Lombre when exposed to a water stone. This evolutionary line is deeply tied to water, plants, and rain-soaked environments, and Ludicolo represents the culmination of that connection. Unlike its earlier forms, which feel small and somewhat reserved, Ludicolo feels expressive and fully realized, as if it has grown into its role within the environment rather than merely surviving in it. The design of Ludicolo is a blend of several inspirations. Its wide, flat head resembles a lily pad, reinforcing its connection to water surfaces and wetlands. Its body has a rounded, almost cartoonish shape, with short limbs and a posture that always seems mid-dance. Its facial expression often appears cheerful, with a permanent smile that makes it look friendly rather than threatening. This design choice immediately sets Ludicolo apart from many other Pokémon that emphasize sharp edges or imposing silhouettes. Ludicolo's grass and water typing reflects its dual nature. It thrives in aquatic environments while also drawing energy from sunlight and plant life. This combination gives it a unique set of resistances and weaknesses that mirror its ecological role. It resists water-type moves, takes reduced damage from ground-type attacks, and can function comfortably in rain-heavy environments. At the same time, it remains vulnerable to flying, bug, and poison-type attacks, ensuring that it is not without risk. In battle, Ludicolo's stats emphasize balance rather than extremes. It has solid special attack, respectable special defense, and enough bulk to stay on the field for extended periods. It is not exceptionally fast by default, but it can become surprisingly quick under the right conditions. This balance reflects its overall theme: adaptability rather than dominance. One of Ludicolo's most defining abilities is Swift Swim, which doubles its speed in rainy weather. This ability transforms Ludicolo from a relaxed, swaying presence into a surprisingly fast and responsive battler when rain is active. Thematically, this makes perfect sense. Rain invigorates Ludicolo, filling it with energy and pushing it into motion. Mechanically, it allows Ludicolo to shine in rain-based teams without requiring excessive setup. Another ability, Rain Dish, allows Ludicolo to recover health gradually during rain. This reinforces its endurance and connection to wet environments. Instead of overwhelming opponents quickly, Ludicolo can outlast them, healing slowly while applying steady pressure. This style of play fits its personality well. It does not rush victory, it dances around it. Ludicolo's move pool reflects both its playful nature and its environmental ties. It learns water-type moves like Surf and Hydro Pump, grass-type moves such as Giga Drain and Energy Ball, and supportive moves like Leech Seed and Rain Dance. This versatility allows it to adapt to different roles depending on how it is trained. It can be offensive, defensive, or supportive, shifting roles as needed. The presence of Rain Dance in Ludicolo's kit is especially fitting. Ludicolo does not wait for ideal conditions. It can create them. By summoning rain itself, it activates its own strengths, reinforcing the idea that Ludicolo thrives when immersed in its preferred environment. This self-sufficiency is subtle but meaningful. In the anime, Ludicolo is often portrayed as cheerful, energetic, and rhythmic. It is frequently shown dancing, reacting strongly to music, and encouraging others to join in. This portrayal solidifies Ludicolo's identity as a Pokémon associated with celebration and movement. Even when it appears briefly, it leaves a strong impression simply through its demeanor. This emphasis on dance is not arbitrary. Ludicolo's design draws inspiration from various cultural elements associated with music and rhythm, particularly from Latin American aesthetics. Its movements, posture, and expressions reflect a joyful relationship with sound and motion. This gives Ludicolo a cultural identity that feels distinct without being tied to a single real-world reference. Ecologically, Ludicolo feels like a Pokémon that plays an active role in maintaining balance within wetland environments. Its grass typing suggests that it contributes to plant growth, while its water typing ties it to rivers, lakes, and rain-fed ecosystems. The idea that it becomes more energetic during rainfall suggests a symbiotic relationship with weather patterns. Ludicolo's pre-evolutions reinforce this progression. Lotad is passive and often floats quietly on the surface of water, resembling a lily pad. Lombre becomes more active and mischievous, moving between water and land. Ludicolo completes this evolution by fully embracing movement and expression. Each stage represents a different way of interacting with the same environment. Despite its cheerful appearance, Ludicolo should not be underestimated. Its typing gives it resistance to several common attack types, and its access to recovery moves allows it to stay in battles longer than expected. Opponents who dismiss it as harmless may find themselves slowly worn down. Ludicolo also benefits from its rarity in some regions. It is not encountered constantly, which makes each appearance feel intentional rather than routine. This rarity contributes to its charm. Ludicolo feels like a special presence rather than a background creature. Over the years, Ludicolo has maintained a consistent identity. It has not received drastic redesigns or alternate forms. Its concept is strong enough that it does not need reinvention. It continues to represent joy, rhythm, and adaptability across generations. In competitive play, Ludicolo has found a niche in rain-based strategies. While it is rarely the centerpiece of a team, It often serves as a reliable contributor, filling gaps and supporting stronger attackers. This supportive role aligns with its personality. Ludicolo enhances the environment rather than dominating it. There is also something quietly soothing about Ludicolo when viewed without context. Imagining it swaying gently in the rain, moving in time with the sound of falling water, creates a sense of calm. It does not demand attention, it invites it. Ludicolo's name itself reflects its playful nature, blending references to lily pads and rhythm. The name feels light and musical, reinforcing its identity as a Pokémon that exists in motion rather than stillness. In a franchise filled with creatures that fight, conquer, and transform landscapes, Ludicolo stands out by simply enjoying its surroundings. It dances because it can, it moves because it feels right. This simplicity is part of its appeal. Ludicolo represents the idea that strength does not always need to be serious. It can be joyful, adaptive, and fluid. It shows that survival and celebration are not mutually exclusive, and that thriving can sometimes look like dancing in the rain. Some Pokemon feel like background details, the kind you see so often that they almost fade into the scenery. Wingull is one of those Pokemon at first glance, a familiar silhouette drifting across coastal skies, easy to overlook and rarely treated as remarkable. But when you slow down and really focus on Wingull, it becomes clear that its simplicity is intentional. Wingull exists as a quiet foundation of the Pokemon world's coastal environments, shaping the atmosphere of oceans, ports, and shorelines without ever demanding attention. Wingull was introduced in Generation 3 and immediately became one of the most recognizable Pokemon associated with seaside locations. Its design is inspired by real-world seagulls, birds that are so common near water that people often stop noticing them altogether. This familiarity is precisely what makes Wingull effective as a world-building Pokemon. It makes the oceans feel lived in, natural, and continuous rather than empty or artificial. Wingull's appearance is minimal and clean. Its body is small and streamlined, primarily white with blue accents along its wings. Its wings themselves are long and flat, extending outward like gliders rather than flapping aggressively. This design suggests efficiency rather than strength. Wingull is not built for combat dominance. It is built for travel, observation, and survival through movement. One of Wingull's most interesting physical traits is its hollow bones. Pokédex entries explain that Wingull's bones are light and filled with air, allowing it to stay aloft for long periods without tiring. This biological detail reinforces its identity as a Pokémon that relies on endurance and efficiency rather than bursts of power. Wingull does not fight the wind, it uses it. This reliance on air currents defines Wingull's behavior. It is often described as riding the wind, gliding effortlessly over the sea without flapping its wings. This creates an image of calm motion, a Pokémon that conserves energy by understanding its environment rather than resisting it. In this way, Wingull embodies a quiet intelligence, one that prioritizes awareness over force. Wingull's water and flying typing fits its coastal lifestyle perfectly. The water typing connects it to the sea it feeds from, while the flying typing allows it to travel vast distances without touching land. This combination gives Wingull several resistances, including immunity to ground-type attacks and resistance to water-type moves. At the same time, it remains vulnerable to electric and rock-type attacks, reflecting the risks of living near cliffs and storms. Stat-wise, Wingull is modest across the board. Its stats are not impressive, and it is not designed to excel in prolonged battles. Its speed is decent, allowing it to move quickly when necessary, but its offensive and defensive capabilities are limited. This reinforces the idea that Wingull survives through avoidance rather than confrontation. In battle, Wingull's role is often transitional. It is frequently encountered early in games and serves as an introduction to water, flying typing. Players rarely keep Wingull long-term unless they plan to evolve it, but even then, its early presence leaves a lasting impression. Wingull teaches players about type matchups, terrain-based encounters, and the importance of adaptability. Wingull evolves into Pelipper at level 25, a relatively early evolution that marks a significant shift in role. While Wingull is light and agile, Pelipper becomes bulkier and more supportive. This evolution represents a change from constant movement to strategic positioning. Wingull, however, remains defined by motion, by the act of drifting and gliding rather than anchoring. The transition from Wingull to Pelipper also mirrors real-world bird behavior. Young birds often rely on speed and maneuverability, while adults develop endurance and purpose-driven movement. Wingull feels like a juvenile form, constantly in motion, exploring coastlines and skies. In the anime, Wingull often appears in flocks near harbors, fishing boats, and coastal towns. It rarely plays a central role in episodes, but its presence adds realism to the setting. Seeing Wingull fly overhead makes ports feel active and connected to the sea. It is environmental storytelling at its quietest and most effective. Wingull's feeding habits further reinforce its ecological role. It is often depicted swooping down to catch small fish or scavenging near shorelines. This behavior aligns with real seabirds and grounds Wingull in a believable ecosystem. It is neither apex predator nor helpless prey. It exists in the middle, adapting to what is available. One of Wingull's more subtle traits is its cry. High-pitched and sharp, it cuts through ambient noise without overwhelming it. This auditory detail contributes to the feeling of open spaces and coastal winds. Hearing Wingull helps define where you are in the Pokémon world, even without visuals. Wingull's move pool is straightforward, featuring basic water and flying type attacks. Moves like Wing Attack and Water Gun reflect its natural abilities rather than learned techniques. It can also learn moves like Supersonic, which ties into its use of sound and disorientation rather than direct damage. This reinforces Wingull's avoidance-based survival strategy. Despite its simplicity, Wingull has remained present across many generations. It frequently appears in regional Pokédexes, maintaining its role as a staple coastal Pokémon. This consistency suggests that Wingull fulfills an important function in the Pokémon ecosystem. Removing it would leave coastlines feeling strangely empty. Wingull's design has remained largely unchanged over time, which speaks to its effectiveness. There has been no need to reinvent or exaggerate its appearance. It already does exactly what it needs to do. It blends into the environment while still being recognizable. In competitive play, Wingull itself is rarely used due to its low stats, but its evolution has gained importance in certain strategies. Still, Wingull's significance is not measured by battle performance. It is measured by atmosphere. It is a reminder that not every Pokémon exists to be powerful. Some exist to make the world feel complete. There is something calming about imagining Wingull drifting over the ocean, wings outstretched, letting the wind decide its path. It does not rush. It does not fight the current. It simply moves where conditions allow. This imagery fits perfectly into long-form, relaxed storytelling. Wingull also represents routine. It is a Pokémon you expect to see near water, just as you expect waves, docks, and distant horizons. That predictability is comforting. It creates continuity across regions and generations. Even its name reflects its simplicity, combining wing and gull into something immediately understandable. There is no mystery to Wingull's identity. It is exactly what it appears to be, and that honesty is part of its charm. In a franchise filled with legendary creatures and dramatic transformations, Wingull quietly persists, unchanged and reliable. It does not seek importance. It achieves it by being present everywhere it belongs. Wingull's value lies in how it fills space rather than commands it. It occupies the sky without owning it, the sea without dominating it. It exists alongside everything else, moving steadily, predictably, and peacefully. Ultimately, Wingull represents the quiet continuity of the Pokémon world. It reminds players that life goes on between battles and story events, that the world keeps moving even when nothing dramatic is happening. In its steady flight and effortless glide, Wingull becomes a symbol of calm persistence, always there, always drifting, shaping the world without ever demanding notice. At a glance, Surskit feels like a Pokémon that exists between categories, not fully aquatic, not fully terrestrial, and not entirely tied to either world. It skims across the surface of water with light, careful movements, never sinking beneath and rarely lingering in one place for long. Surskit's presence is subtle, almost easy to miss, but that in-between nature is exactly what defines it. It is a Pokémon shaped by balance, precision, and the ability to move where others cannot. Surskit was introduced in Generation 3 and immediately stood out for its unusual method of movement. Rather than swimming or walking, Surskit glides across the surface of ponds, lakes, and marshes, supported by the tension of the water itself. This ability is reflected directly in its Pokédex entries, which explain that Surskit secretes a special oil from its feet, allowing it to walk on water without breaking the surface. This detail grounds Surskit firmly in real-world inspiration, drawing parallels to water striders, insects known for their ability to skate across ponds. Surskit's design reinforces this idea of lightness and precision. Its body is small and rounded, with thin legs extending downward, each one carefully placed to distribute weight evenly. Its head is slightly bulbous, with large eyes that give it a gentle, almost curious expression. The thin antennae extending from its head suggest heightened sensitivity to movement and vibration, fitting for a creature that relies on balance to survive. Originally, Surskit was a water and bug-type Pokémon in Generation 3, a rare and interesting combination at the time. This typing reflected its insect-like body and aquatic lifestyle. In later generations, its typing was changed to bug only, a decision that aligned more closely with its evolution and battle identity. Even so, its association with water remains central to its lore and behavior. Surskit's habitat is typically described as shallow bodies of water, such as ponds and wetlands, where the surface remains relatively calm. Rough waters and strong currents are dangerous for Surskit, as they disrupt the surface tension it depends on. This environmental limitation makes Surskit highly sensitive to weather and surroundings, reinforcing its identity as a Pokémon that thrives only under specific conditions. This sensitivity shapes Surskit's behavior. It is cautious, reactive, and quick to flee when threatened. Rather than standing its ground, Surskit relies on speed and unpredictability to avoid danger. Its movements are described as erratic but controlled, darting across water in short bursts to confuse predators. This behavior makes it difficult to catch, even though it is not physically strong. In battle, Surskit's stats reflect its fragility. It has low defense and HP, meaning it cannot withstand sustained attacks. However, its speed is relatively high for its size, allowing it to move first and reposition quickly. This reinforces the idea that Surskit survives through avoidance rather than endurance. Surskit's move pool is modest but thematic. It learns bug-type moves that emphasize quick strikes rather than raw power, as well as water-related techniques in earlier generations. Moves like Bubble and Quick Attack align with its light, skimming movement. It can also learn moves that disrupt opponents, such as Sweet Scent, which lowers evasion and ties into its ability to manipulate its environment subtly. One of Surskit's most defining traits is its evolution into Masquerain at level 22. This evolution represents a dramatic shift in both form and function. While Surskit remains close to the water's surface, Masquerain takes to the air, gaining wings and a more imposing presence. This evolution suggests a life cycle where Surskit serves as a juvenile stage focused on survival and movement, before transforming into something more visible and assertive. The contrast between Surskit and Masquerain makes Surskit feel like a transitional Pokémon, one that exists primarily to prepare for a different role later in life. This mirrors many real-world insects that begin life in water before emerging into aerial forms. That biological realism adds depth to Surskit's design, making it feel like part of a larger natural system rather than an isolated creature. In the anime, Surskit is often portrayed as gentle and skittish. It avoids confrontation and reacts strongly to disturbances in its environment. These portrayals emphasize its reliance on calm conditions and reinforce the idea that Surskit is always listening, always aware of changes in the water beneath it. Surskit's presence in the Pokémon world contributes to environmental storytelling in subtle ways. When Surskit appears, it signals calm waters and stable ecosystems. Its absence suggests disruption, pollution, or danger. In this way, Surskit acts almost like a living indicator of environmental health. Despite its small size, Surskit plays an important ecological role. By feeding on tiny organisms and insects near the water's surface, it helps regulate populations that might otherwise grow unchecked. This makes it a quiet participant in maintaining balance rather than a dominant force. Surskit's design avoids aggression entirely. There are no sharp edges, no intimidating features. Everything about it suggests caution and delicacy. This makes it one of the more peaceful bug-type Pokémon, reinforcing the idea that not all insects in the Pokémon world are meant to be unsettling or dangerous. Over time, Surskit has remained relatively obscure. It does not appear frequently in marketing, and it is rarely the focus of major story moments. Yet it continues to appear in regional Pokédexes, maintaining its role as a representative of calm, shallow water environments. Its consistency across generations speaks to the strength of its concept. There is also something quietly relaxing about imagining Surskit moving across a still pond, barely disturbing the surface. Its movements are small, precise, and deliberate, creating a sense of stillness rather than chaos. Surskit's name reflects its nature perfectly, blending surface and skirt, or skitter, suggesting light movement across a boundary. The name itself feels quick and gentle, mirroring the Pokémon's behavior. In competitive play, Surskit is rarely used due to its low stats and reliance on evolution to become viable. However, its purpose is not competitive dominance. Its purpose is narrative and ecological. It exists to make the world feel layered and alive. Surskit reminds players that not every Pokémon needs to be powerful to be important. Some exist to connect environments, to represent transitions, and to show how life adapts to narrow niches. Its ability to live on the boundary between water and air makes it symbolic of adaptation through precision rather than strength. There is also a sense of vulnerability to Surskit that makes it relatable. It cannot afford mistakes. A sudden wave, a strong wind, or a careless step could end its life. And yet, it continues to move forward, navigating its world carefully, one step at a time. In the broader context of the Pokemon world, Surskit contributes to the feeling that every environment has its own inhabitants, each shaped by the smallest details. It is a Pokemon that could only exist in calm waters, and that specificity makes it feel authentic. Some Pokemon feel like they were designed to surprise you the longer you spend with them, and Breloom is a perfect example of that quiet contradiction. At first glance, it appears playful and almost soft, with rounded features and a posture that doesn't immediately suggest danger. But beneath that calm, almost relaxed exterior is a Pokemon built around precision, resilience, and an unexpectedly disciplined fighting style. Breloom is not loud about its strength. It reveals it gradually through patience and timing. Breloom was introduced in Generation 3 as the evolution of Shroomish, a small, mushroom-like Pokemon that spends much of its time hiding in forests. Shroomish is slow, passive, and defensive, relying on spores and endurance rather than movement. When it evolves into Breloom at level 23, the transformation is dramatic. The round, stationary form gives way to something upright and agile, a Pokemon that has traded stillness for motion. The design of Breloom reflects this shift clearly. Its body becomes taller and more humanoid, with strong legs that suggest jumping and kicking rather than crawling or waiting. Its arms are short but flexible, and its tail ends in a cluster of seed-like bulbs that hint at its lingering connection to plants. The mushroom cap that defined Shroomish remains, but it now feels like a symbol rather than a shelter. Breloom's grass and fighting typing is one of the most interesting combinations introduced in its generation. Grass-type Pokemon are often associated with growth, healing, and patience, while fighting-type Pokemon emphasize discipline, technique, and physical combat. Together, these types suggest a Pokemon that has learned to channel natural energy into controlled movement rather than raw aggression. This combination creates a unique battle identity. Breloom has strong resistances to certain attack types while also carrying significant weaknesses. It resists water, electric, and ground-type attacks, giving it stability against common threats. However, it is highly vulnerable to flying-type attacks, which can exploit its upright posture and limited aerial defense. This balance reinforces the idea that Breloom thrives when grounded and focused, but struggles when forced out of its element. Stat-wise, Breloom is defined by its physical attack. It boasts one of the highest attack stats among non-legendary Pokemon introduced in Generation 3, especially for its size. This power is concentrated in its legs and arms, which are used for precise strikes rather than wild swings. Its speed is moderate, allowing it to act before many opponents, but not dominate purely through quickness. Breloom's defense and special defense are respectable but not overwhelming, meaning it cannot afford prolonged exposure to heavy attacks. This encourages a playstyle built around decisive action. Breloom is most effective when it enters battle with a clear plan, executes it quickly, and exits before taking too much damage. One of Breloom's most defining traits is its access to status moves that disrupt opponents rather than overpower them outright. It can learn Spore, a move that induces sleep with perfect accuracy. This move alone has defined Breloom's reputation across multiple generations. Sleep removes an opponent from battle temporarily, allowing Breloom to control the pace rather than rush into conflict. Spore is thematically perfect for Breloom. Despite its fighting typing, it does not abandon its botanical roots. It still relies on spores, lingering effects, and environmental control. This blend of natural and physical techniques gives Breloom a layered identity, one that feels both ancient and refined. Breloom also learns powerful physical moves that capitalize on its attack stat, such as punches and kicks that emphasize technique over brute force. These moves often feel deliberate rather than explosive, reinforcing the idea that Breloom fights with intention. It does not waste energy. Every movement has a purpose. In the anime, Breloom is often portrayed as agile and focused, capable of leaping long distances and delivering precise strikes. Its movements resemble martial arts more than brawling, suggesting training and discipline rather than instinct alone. This portrayal aligns well with its fighting typing, presenting Breloom as a practitioner rather than a berserker. Ecologically, Breloom feels like a forest guardian rather than a predator. Its grass typing ties it to dense woodland environments where mushrooms and plant life thrive. Shroomish hides in shadows and damp soil, while Breloom emerges into clearings, using its mobility to patrol and defend territory. This progression mirrors the life cycle of many organisms that begin hidden and passive before becoming active participants in their ecosystem. Breloom's ability options further reinforce its role. Effect Spore allows it to inflict status conditions on attackers, punishing those who make contact without caution. This ability makes Breloom dangerous to engage directly, encouraging opponents to think carefully before striking. Its other common ability, Technician, boosts the power of weaker moves, turning precise, efficient attacks into serious threats. This ability rewards careful move selection rather than raw power. The Technician ability in particular fits Breloom's personality. It suggests mastery of fundamentals, the idea that even small, controlled movements can be devastating when executed perfectly. Breloom does not need overwhelming force. It refines what it has. Breloom's evolution timing also plays an important role in how players experience it. Shroomish is often slow and difficult to use effectively early on, testing patience. When it finally evolves, the payoff is significant. Breloom feels like a reward for endurance, reinforcing the theme that strength earned slowly is often more satisfying. Despite its effectiveness, Breloom is not flashy in design or lore. It does not dominate storylines or receive constant attention. Instead, it quietly maintains relevance through utility and consistency. This understated presence makes it memorable to players who appreciate subtle strength. Breloom's appearance has remained consistent across generations, with no drastic redesigns or alternate forms. This consistency reflects confidence in its original concept. It does not need reinvention to stay interesting. Its balance of plant-based control and physical combat continues to feel unique. In competitive contexts, Breloom has remained viable for years due to its access to spore and strong physical attacks. Even as new mechanics are introduced, Breloom adapts without losing its identity. This adaptability reflects its ecological theme. It survives by adjusting, not by overwhelming change. There is also something quietly grounding about Breloom's posture and movement. It stands firmly on the ground, knees bent slightly, ready but not tense. This stance suggests readiness rather than aggression. It is prepared, not eager. Breloom's name itself blends bloom with brawler, reinforcing its dual nature. It grows, but it also fights. It nurtures, but it defends. This balance defines everything about it. Breloom reminds players that strength does not always come from size or intimidation. Sometimes it comes from understanding timing, from knowing when to wait and when to act. Its reliance on sleep-inducing spores emphasizes patience, while its fighting techniques emphasize discipline. Within the Pokémon world, Breloom represents the idea that growth leads not just to size or power, but to control. Shroomish survives by hiding. Breloom survives by mastering its environment. That evolution is not just physical, it is philosophical. Some Pokemon feel unsettling, not because they are large or powerful, but because they seem to exist just slightly out of step with the rest of the world. Sableye is one of those Pokemon. It doesn't announce itself with noise or force. It watches, it waits, and when it moves, it does so quietly, as if it has always been there, just outside your line of sight. Sableye's presence feels less like an encounter and more like a realization. Sableye was introduced in Generation 3 and immediately stood apart from most other Pokemon of its time. Its small stature, hunched posture, and gem-like eyes gave it a distinctly eerie appearance. Unlike many Dark-type Pokemon that lean into aggression or menace, Sableye feels subtle and strange, more curious than hostile. It does not look like a fighter, it looks like an observer. The most striking feature of Sableye is its eyes. Instead of normal pupils, its eyes are faceted gemstones that reflect light unnaturally. These gem-like eyes are not decorative. Pokédex entries explain that Sableye feeds on gemstones, and over time, the energy from those gems alters its body. Its eyes become jewel-like as a result of its diet, permanently glowing in darkness. This detail alone gives Sableye a quietly unsettling biological foundation. Sableye's body is small and thin, with sharp claws and elongated fingers that suggest dexterity rather than strength. Its movements are often described as sneaky and deliberate. It does not rush. It does not chase. Instead, it hides in darkness, observing its surroundings until it finds an opportunity to feed. This behavior reinforces its identity as a creature of caves, mines, and shadowed places. Its typing plays a major role in how it feels within the Pokemon world. Originally introduced as a dark and ghost type, Sableye had no weaknesses at all before later changes introduced new type interactions. This lack of weakness made it feel unnatural, as though it existed outside the normal rules governing Pokemon battles. Even after balance changes, that original identity lingers in how players remember it. The combination of dark and ghost typing suggests a Pokemon that exists between concepts. Dark types are often associated with trickery, instinct, and underhanded tactics, while ghost types are tied to the unseen, the lingering, and the mysterious. Together, they create a creature that does not confront threats directly, but avoids them entirely, slipping through gaps others cannot. Sableye's stats reflect this elusive nature. It is not particularly strong or fast, and its defenses are modest. Instead of relying on raw numbers, Sableye survives through abilities, positioning, and disruption. It is not meant to overwhelm opponents, it is meant to frustrate them. One of Sableye's defining abilities is Keen Eye in earlier generations, which prevents its accuracy from being lowered. This fits thematically, suggesting that Sableye's gem eyes see through tricks and distractions. Later abilities emphasize mischief and interference, reinforcing its role as a Pokemon that disrupts rather than dominates. In battle, Sableye excels at status effects and control. It learns moves that interfere with opponents' plans, disrupt momentum, and create openings rather than dealing massive damage outright. This makes encounters with Sableye feel less like straightforward fights and more like games of patience and awareness. In the anime, Sableye is often portrayed as playful but unsettling. It laughs quietly, hides in shadows, and watches characters from dark corners. Its behavior is not openly malicious, but it is unpredictable. This unpredictability creates tension, even when Sableye is not actively threatening anyone. Ecologically, Sableye occupies a unique niche. It lives in caves rich with minerals, feeding on gemstones rather than traditional food sources. This diet sets it apart from most Pokémon and suggests a metabolism unlike anything else. Sableye does not hunt living creatures. It consumes concentrated energy locked within crystals. This feeding behavior also explains why Sableye is often found in abandoned mines and deep caverns. It prefers places untouched by frequent activity, where gems can form undisturbed. These environments are quiet, dark, and isolated, matching Sableye's personality perfectly. Sableye's relationship with gemstones adds an interesting layer to its lore. Gems are often associated with value, beauty, and permanence. Sableye consumes them casually, treating something precious as sustenance. This inversion makes Sableye feel detached from human values, unconcerned with worth or rarity. There is also an implied patience in Sableye's lifestyle. Gem formation takes time. Living in caves requires waiting, observing, and enduring long periods without change. Sableye's calm demeanor reflects this slow rhythm. It is not hurried. It exists on geological timescales rather than human ones. In later generations, Sableye received a mega evolution that exaggerated its gemstone theme, covering its body with a massive crystal. This form amplified its defensive nature, turning it into something even more stationary and impenetrable. While dramatic, this evolution also reinforced the idea that Sableye becomes more powerful the longer it remains connected to its environment. Despite its eerie design, Sableye is not depicted as inherently dangerous. It does not attack indiscriminately. It does not seek conflict. It is opportunistic rather than aggressive. This makes it feel more like a creature surviving quietly than a threat seeking attention. Sableye's presence adds texture to the Pokémon world's darker environments. Without it, caves and mines would feel empty or purely functional. Sableye makes these spaces feel inhabited, alive with unseen watchers and subtle movement. There is something quietly symbolic about Sableye's gem eyes. Eyes are often associated with perception and awareness, and Sableye's eyes literally reflect light and darkness. It sees where others cannot. This gives it an almost watchful quality, as though it is always aware of its surroundings, even when no one is aware of it. Sableye's name itself contributes to its identity. It blends sable, a word associated with darkness, with eye, emphasizing sight. The name suggests a creature defined by seeing in the dark, by awareness rather than action. Over time, Sableye has maintained a cult following among fans who appreciate its unusual design and subtle lore. It is not universally loved, but it is memorable. Its uniqueness ensures that it is rarely forgotten once encountered. Sableye also represents a different kind of danger in the Pokémon world. Not the danger of force, but the danger of being watched, of not knowing what is nearby. It reminds players that not all threats are loud or obvious. In contrast to many Pokémon that grow larger or more aggressive as they evolve, Sableye remains small and contained. Its power comes from persistence and positioning, not expansion. This restraint makes it feel grounded despite its supernatural elements. There is also a quiet loneliness to Sableye. Living in dark, isolated places suggests a solitary existence. It does not form large groups or communities. It exists on its own, sustained by the slow rhythm of the earth. Ultimately, Sableye represents the unseen layers of the Pokémon world. The places beneath the surface, the quiet corners, the things that watch without interfering. It is not a creature of spectacle, but of atmosphere. In a world filled with bright battles and dramatic transformations, Sableye offers something different. It lingers, it observes, it waits. And in doing so, it reminds us that some of the most memorable presences are the ones that never announce themselves at all.